Hey, tonight we're going to talk about something that might make you wrinkle your nose or raise an eyebrow before you drift off. Why medieval people feared taking baths. You might imagine the Middle Ages as a filthy, unwashed time where people avoided water out of sheer laziness. But that's not quite fair or entirely true. The real story is weirder, darker, and full of strange logic. See, for a while, public bathhouses were thriving, social places, steamy, fragrant, and lively. But then came fears about disease, sin, and the devil lurking in warm water. Doctors warned that hot baths opened your pores so miasmas and demons could creep in. Priests thundered about carnal temptation in the steam rooms. Civic leaders fretted over outbreaks of plague. Tonight, we'll wander through steamy bathhouses in medieval Paris, watch them shut down in terror during plague years, and hear 16th century physicians calmly explain that bathing could unbalance your humours and cause fevers. We'll visit Japanese bath traditions that continued uninterrupted while Europeans gave it up. We'll stand in a noblewoman's solar while she's sponged down with scented cloth instead of risking a tub. We'll listen to a barber surgeon extol the virtues of scraping filth from your skin rather than soaking it. We'll talk about Henry IV of France, who was said to bathe only twice in his life and thought that was just fine. We'll explore medieval medical treatises full of fearsome warnings about heated water, and we'll gently laugh at the moral panic that turned bathhouses from popular spas into dens of vice in the eyes of the church. So dim the lights. Settle under your blanket, get cozy while you listen to the clatter of wooden tubs, the hiss of heated water over coals, the quiet prayers of patients who fear they're inviting plague with every wash. If you enjoy these weird and sleepy journeys through the grey, me and gloom of history, I'd really appreciate a like or a subscribe. I'm super curious where you're listening from. Drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It's always oddly calming to know how many of us are scattered across the world, nodding off to the same old human foibles. Tonight, let's drift through the long, strange, occasionally stinky history of bathing fear in the medieval world. I promise it'll be cleaner than it sounds. Ready? Let's begin. You stand at the threshold of a bustling bathhouse in 14th century Paris. Steam coils lazily from the wooden door as customers shuffle in, coin purses clinking, towels over arms. The smell is surprisingly pleasant. Rosemary, thyme, a hint of warmed honey soap. You see the bath attendants scurrying about, stoking copper cauldrons over roaring hearths, pouring steaming water into deep wooden tubs lined with linen to keep splinters away from delicate skin. The place is alive with chatter, merchants bragging about wool prices, priests lowering their voices to confess doubts they should not have, lovers exchanging glances behind the safety of rising mist. This isn't a den of filth or fear. It's the medieval equivalent of a spa, social club, and sometimes, if you listen carefully, a brothel. Bathhouses were everywhere in Europe at this time. The church hadn't banned them yet, though priests were starting to grumble about the sins of steam. But for now, no one seems worried. You watch a bather recline as attendants scrub his back with coarse cloth, the sound of rushing water mixing with laughter. You smell the tang of vinegar used to rinse hair, see buckets of scented herbs ready for the next infusion. A sign hangs on the wall with prices. Private tubs cost more, communal pools are cheaper. There's even food service. You'd think you were in an early cafe, except everyone's half naked and pink from heat. You listen to the scraping of ladles in stew pots, the clink of wine cups, the slosh of water being topped up. But there's a rumour in the steam, whispers about disease, about something worse than lice or fleas, about plague, and you see an attendant frown, glancing toward the door as if expecting city guards any moment. In a few years, these bathhouses will be shuttered by order of the magistrates, blamed for spreading the Black Death. Doctors will proclaim that hot water opens. You step into a physician's study in 15th century Florence. Shelves sag beneath the weight of leather-bound volumes, Arabic medical texts, Galen's works copied and recopied, grimoires and herbal manuals. The smell is thick with ink, vellum, and the faintly sour scent of dried herbs. A doctor in a red cap peers over his pince-nez, explaining solemnly to a worried merchant that hot baths are dangerous. They relax the body too much, he says. They open the pores. Miasmas enter. You listen as he taps a dusty diagram of the four humours: blood, phlegm, black bile, yellow bile. Balance must be preserved, he intones. Bathing overheats the blood, causes fever, even madness. You watch the patient nod obediently, folding his hands. Outside, plague has receded, but fear remains. The doctor prescribes instead a sponge bath of rosewater and vinegar, the cool liquid meant to close the pores against corruption. You see the assistant stirring it in a chipped ceramic bowl. Not far away, a wealthy household orders a bath to be prepared, but cautiously. They line the tub with clean linen, boil the water, and wait for it to cool so it's only lukewarm. The lady of the house lowers herself carefully, worried that too much heat will excite the passions or invite sickness. Her maid scrubs her gently with a soft cloth, avoiding any scandalous splashing. You can almost hear the muted conversation, worries about gossip, doctors' warnings, priests' sermons about humility. In Florence, bathhouses have declined, their steamy pleasures viewed with moral suspicion. A few remain on the fringes of town, shuttered in times of outbreak, raided for supposed indecency. Yet the city still remembers better days when bathhouses were a civic amenity, praised for cleanliness and health. The contradiction hangs in the air like incense. You trail your fingers along the cool marble of the study's walls, listen to the physician dictating new notes. Bathing best avoided in winter months. Frequent dry rubbing recommended. Air the body. He stops to cough into his sleeve, ironically unbothered by his own hygiene. Outside, the bell of a nearby monastery tolls, summoning prayers against pestilence. You imagine the sick huddling in cloisters, too frightened to risk a bath that might open them to evil vapours. You exhale slowly. The room is dim, lit only by a guttering candle. You listen to the scratching of the quill, the shuffling of parchment, the rustle of woolen robes, and you drift on the notion that in this world, water isn't just cleansing, it's dangerous, seductive, a portal for death itself. You wander north now to medieval London in the 14th century, where public bathhouses once dotted the Thameside lanes, like cheerful little islands of warmth in the damp chill. They were called stews, and for a while they were respectable enough. Licensed by the city, inspected, however perfunctorily, and popular with travellers who craved relief from the mud-caked roads and smoky hearths. You hear the shouts of water carriers sloshing heavy buckets, the clang of iron kettles set over coals. The air is damp with vapour and a thin scent of lye soap. But you also hear the jokes. Stews quickly gained a reputation for prostitution, so much so that city authorities issued fines for sinful behaviour, then shrugged and collected the money anyway. You listen to an official readout regulations: no fornication on Sundays, no bathing after dark without a lantern. It sounds sensible until you hear the knowing laughter from the crowd. When plague arrived, panic settled like a wet cloak over London. Physicians advised shutting the stews. The mayor issued proclamations warning that steam spread corruption. Bathing itself became suspect. You watch as city guards nail shut the doors of a bathhouse, ignoring the protests of owners. Inside, the warm pools go cold. The towels rot on the floor. The plaster walls mildew. But not everyone obeys. A few illicit baths pop up in basements and stables, hushed meetings of the desperate and the defiant. You hear whispered negotiations, a copper coin for a bucket of hot water, 2 for privacy. The poor make do with washing in icy rain barrels, trembling in the wind. And then the plague surges again. You see black-shrouded carts rumbling through the streets. Parish clerks tally the dead with shaking hands. Fear grows so thick you can taste it. Rancid sweat, rank mud, and the metallic bite of panic on your tongue. You lean against a wet stone wall, and watch people turn away from water altogether, trading cleanliness for what they think is safety. Their clothes get stiff with grime, their hair crawls with lice, but at least they're protected, they mutter. In the hush of dawn, you listen to the Thames lapping at the banks. It carries refuse, corpses, the dreams of a city too frightened to wash itself. You close your eyes and drift, wondering how something as simple as hot water became so terrifying. Now you're in a cramped room in Nuremberg, Germany, in the early 16th century. The fire pops in the hearth, sending up lazy sparks that fade before they hit the cracked plaster ceiling. A family prepares for their rare, careful bath. You smell beeswax candles and damp wool. The tub is a stout wooden barrel lined with linen, the water ladled in from pots heated over the coals. But no one plunges in eagerly. They test the temperature with wary fingers, ensuring it's only warm, not hot. Their local doctor warned them too much heat would thin the humours, make them vulnerable to pestilence. Instead, he recommended dry baths, vigorous rubbing with coarse cloths, dusting with herbal powders to absorb sweat. You watch the father hold up a pouch of lavender and sage, crushing it between calloused fingers and sprinkling it over the water like a charm against evil spirits. They take turns, oldest to youngest, careful to avoid sharing too much water for fear of contagion. The mother scrubs her toddler's back with a frayed sponge, humming a hymn that sounds more like a plea. Outside, rumours swirl about witchcraft. Clean skin is suspiciously vain. A neighbour's girl who bathed too often is whispered to consort with demons. You see the father glance at the shuttered window as if afraid the village priest might barge in and denounce them for bathing. Bathhouses here have closed too. Once they were popular, good business for the town coffers. But after repeated outbreaks of plague, city councils declared them unsanitary. The buildings stand abandoned, their wooden beams warped by rain. You hear the wind whistle through the cracks, rattling the latch. A dog barks in the alley, the sound lonely. Inside, the family dries off quickly, bundling into rough linen shifts. They avoid conversation about whether they're clean enough. After all, they've tried, and trying is brave in a world where even water can kill you. You rest your head against the warm wood of the barrel, listening to the dying fire, the shifting timbers of the old house, and you let yourself drift, thinking of all the quiet acts of defiance that a single bath represented. Now let's wander east, away from Europe to medieval Japan in the 13th century, a contrast so stark it feels like stepping into another world. You kneel in a wooden bathhouse near Kyoto. The scent of hinoki cypress fills the humid air, mingling with rising clouds of clean, hot steam. You listen to water ladled gently over smooth stones, the quiet conversation respectful and hushed. Here, there is no fear of bathing. On the contrary, it's considered essential, a ritual of both purity and relaxation. Monks bathe in temple baths, families soak together in small tubs at home. You watch as attendants carefully scrub every inch of skin before anyone even steps into the shared water. There are rules: never enter dirty, never rush, respect the silence, the space. You hear the gentle splash as an elderly man eases himself into the tub, eyes closing in relief. Japanese medical texts of the period don't warn about demons entering open pores. Instead, they extol the cleansing power of water, its ability to balance ki, to soothe joints, to purify mind and body alike. Outside, the bathhouse gardens rustle with wind in bamboo groves. Crickets chirp, the moon glows through paper screens. You notice no one seems embarrassed by nudity. It's not a temptation, but a state of vulnerability, shared by all, diffused of shame. You hear a child giggle as her mother pours warm water over her back, the sound gentle, private. You think about the European fear of unbalanced humours and miasmas, the shuttered bathhouses and whispered sins. Here, water is simply water. But even in Japan, bathing isn't entirely without superstition. You overhear an old woman warn that if you bathe at midnight, you might invite wandering spirits. So you listen to the laughter as people promise to be finished long before the witching hour. You close your eyes, feeling the steam on your face, the faint scent of pine. Do you wonder how a simple act, lowering yourself into warm water, could mean such different things in different places? You breathe in slowly, the air damp and clean, and you drift, listening to the slow trickle of water, wondering which fears are universal and which are taught. You find yourself in a vast medieval monastery in France in the 12th century, cloistered halls echoing with Gregorian chant. The air is chill, smelling of damp stone, beeswax candles, and old parchment. Monks move in quiet procession, robes rustling against flagstone. Cleanliness here is ritualized but cautious. You follow them to the monastery's bathhouse, built decades ago when the rule of Saint Benedict was interpreted with some flexibility. Bathing was encouraged for health, at least occasionally. A monk opens the heavy oak door. Steam billows out, mixing with the scent of rosemary boiled in the water to ward off disease. They bathe in pairs for modesty, scrubbing quickly, murmuring prayers as they work. You hear water slap against the sides of the stone basin. But there's tension. The abbot has grown stricter. Rumours of lax discipline have reached the bishop. Too much bathing, he says, tempts the flesh. Too much comfort is sin. You see a novice scrubbing at his skin until it's red, as if trying to erase temptation itself. Another pours cool water over his head, teeth chattering in penance. Outside the bathhouse, the wind rattles through cloisters, carrying the smell of turned earth and distant smoke. The church's stance is evolving. Some orders will forbid communal bathing entirely. Others will impose strict schedules, 4 baths per year for the devout, clean enough to be godly, but not indulgent enough to risk vice. You watch the monks finish, drying off with coarse linen. They bow to one another, avoiding eye contact, as if embarrassed by the simple act of cleaning their bodies. The water left behind ripples gently, reflecting the guttering torchlight. As you step outside with them, the cold night air bites at damp skin. The silence feels heavy, like judgment. You listen to the chant resume in the chapel, voices rising in prayer for purity, for deliverance from temptation. And you realize that even here, where bathing is meant to be an act of health and humility, it's tangled with fear, of the body, of sin, of the line between discipline and desire. You pull your robe tighter, feel the dampness chill you to the bone, and drift on the echo of Latin words intoned in the dark. You're in medieval Spain now, in the 13th century, in the midst of the Christian Reconquista. You stand at the threshold of a once grand Islamic bathhouse, an hammam, its graceful arches cracked but still beautiful. The air inside is cool and scented faintly with old lime plaster. Mosaics of cobalt and ochre gleam in places where the light slants through narrow windows. This place was once alive with steam and conversation, the splash of water in marble basins, the hiss of hot stones as water was ladled over them. You listen for ghosts of laughter, of debate over poetry and politics, of gentle chiding between friends. For centuries, Muslims in Al-Andalus treated bathing as essential. Cleanliness was part of faith, tahara, a sign of respect for oneself and God. Attendants would offer rose water, oils, gentle massages. You see shelves where soap made with olive oil and scented herbs once rested. You smell the ghost of it still, faint but comforting. But now it's empty. The Christian conquerors regarded the hammams with suspicion, too sensual, too foreign, too Islamic. Many were shuttered, converted to storehouses, even churches. You walk across cracked tiles, dust motes drift in the light. A bucket lies overturned in a corner. You think of the knowledge lost, how to keep water pure, how to heat a room evenly with hypercoarse channels beneath the floor. Outside, new rulers decree taxes on bathhouses. Others order them closed entirely. Disease outbreaks bring new excuses, miasmas, immorality, heresy. You hear a priest preaching in the plaza, voice harsh, railing against the sins of the Moors, condemning their love of comfort, their dangerous hygiene. And you wonder how water, so neutral, so necessary, became a marker of religion, culture, and suspicion. You run your hand along the cool stone, tracing a vine motif carved centuries ago. You imagine the steam rising once more. Voy. 'Tis debating the merits of Aristotle and Avicenna, the sound of gentle splashing. But that was another time. Now the silence seems to weigh heavy. You breathe it in, cool and dry, and let yourself drift on the memory of water that once flowed freely here. Let's head to a German city in the 15th century, where the plague never seems far away. You're in the workshop of a barber surgeon, the smell of blood, vinegar, and old leather filling your nose. He's a man of many trades. You see his tools, razors, lancets, bone saws, and, oddly enough, scrubbing brushes. He insists bathing is risky, but scraping the skin clean is essential. You watch as he demonstrates on an anxious apprentice. He uses a coarse cloth, dips it in vinegar, and scrubs hard. Draws out the bad humours, he explains solemnly. Closes the pores after. You can almost feel the sting on your own arms. The apprentice winces but doesn't complain. Better scraped raw than dead from plague, he figures. Behind him hangs a parchment of medical advice. Avoid hot baths entirely during times of pestilence. Instead, cleanse with vinegar, dust with powders of sage and rosemary, pray fervently for protection. You hear the town crier outside reading out the latest mortality lists, his voice flat from repetition. People hurry by with cloths over their mouths. The barber surgeon's shop does brisk business, bloodletting, tooth-pulling, lancing boils. He pauses to mop sweat from his brow, then turns to a mother who's brought her feverish child. He suggests a dry rub with strong vinegar and prayers to Saint Roch. No one questions it. The fear is too thick. Outside, the public baths have been closed for years. Their wooden doors hang crooked on rusted hinges. Grass grows between the cobbles where children used to run, towels over shoulders, laughing. Now people mutter that the devil waits in the steam. You watch the barber surgeon tidy his tools, hands steady, eyes tired. He's a man who believes he's saving lives, even as he spreads fear of water itself. You lean against the rough wooden wall, listening to the scrape of metal on leather as he sharpens his blade for the next patient. And you wonder how certainty and terror can live so comfortably side by side. You find yourself in Renaissance Italy, in the grand palazzo of a wealthy merchant family. The walls are covered in frescoes of saints and classical heroes, bright with pigment even in the dim candlelight. But the grandest room tonight is not the dining hall, but the sola, where the lady of the house sits in a carved chair preparing for her bath. No tub here. She sits in layers of linen, servants standing by with bowls of warm, scented water. They dip soft cloths in rosewater and vinegar, wringing them carefully before wiping her arms, neck, face. You smell crushed petals, a hint of citrus imported at great expense. She talks quietly with her maid about local gossip. Who is ill, who has fled the city because of rumours of plague, who refuses to see visitors for fear of open pores. She shifts uncomfortably, wanting to be clean but not too clean. Hot water is dangerous, says the family doctor. Warm water is acceptable, if sparing. Outside, the city brims with life, masked carnivals ringing church bells, the rattle of wagons over cobblestones. But fear hums beneath the revelry. Plague has a way of returning without warning. You watch as a servant scrubs the floor afterward with vinegar, careful to keep everything pure. You see the other maids exchanging nervous glances, aware that death might be on the wind, no matter how many times they mop. And you wonder about this contradiction, immense wealth but terror of a proper soak in a hot bath. You trace your finger along the carved arm of the chair, feel the warmth of candlelight on your face, and listen to the quiet splash of water in silver bowls. And you drift on the uneasy hush that even money can't buy safety from fear. You walk the streets of medieval Avignon during the 14th century papal residency. The city is rich, crowded, and nervous. The Rhone River runs sluggishly nearby, carrying refuse and secrets. People bustle about in wool cloaks, clutching pomanders to their noses. The air smells of damp earth, wood smoke, and too many bodies crammed in too small a space. You duck into one of the city's remaining bathhouses, a place on borrowed time. Inside, the water is tepid, the lighting poor. Candles gutter in sconces. Attendants speak in hushed voices. A priest sits in a corner, reluctantly scrubbing his feet while muttering prayers for protection. Doctors here warn about plague spreading through warm water, but the people are torn. They're filthy, itching with lice, desperate for relief. You see the lines of worry in their faces as they negotiate a short soak, praying they're not inviting death in with the heat. Outside, papal decrees waver. Sometimes they shut the baths in fear. Other times they allow them with strict rules. The balance between cleanliness and terror is as fragile as the flickering candlelight. You hear a man insisting the baths must stay open. God would not punish us for cleanliness, he says, voice shaking, but his neighbour hisses back. God punishes pride, lust, nakedness. You feel the heat on your skin, damp and heavy, but strangely comforting, and you listen to the quiet fear that even the Pope can't fully banish. You step outside into the cool night. Bells toll from the papal palace, echoing over red-tiled roofs. The river laps at its banks, indifferent to human worries, and you drift, wondering if fear itself was the real disease that no decree could cure. You find yourself in Krakow, Poland, in the late 14th century, standing outside the town's municipal bathhouse. It's a sturdy timber building, tiled roof streaked with soot, smoke curls from the chimney. Inside, fires heat enormous iron cauldrons of water that will be poured into wooden tubs. You listen to the creak of the door as someone leaves, steam billowing out in a fragrant cloud of juniper and rosemary. For now, business is good. The town council regulates the bathhouse, charging fees, even enforcing cleanliness standards. You walk in and see a scene of cautious optimism. Merchants and craftsmen barter for extra time in the tub. A midwife soaks sore feet while chatting with an old friend. Children shriek with laughter as their mothers try to hush them. But there's an undercurrent. A healer clutching a rosary is telling a worried father that hot baths weaken the body's natural defenses. Your pores open, she warns. Foul air enters. Plague rides on the wind. The father looks at his child, feverish and restless. He hesitates, then orders a half bath, lukewarm water only. You see the attendant ladling carefully, apologetic for the chill. On the walls, notices from the city council instruct bathers to avoid visiting if they have coughs, fevers or sores. A guard sits near the entrance, pretending to read a psalter, but really watching for rule breakers. You hear rumours in the corners, entire families taken overnight, priests refusing last rites for fear of contagion. And you see the small acts of defiance. A washerwoman quickly pours a little extra hot water for an old client who tips well. Two young lovers, red-faced, slip behind a linen screen for privacy. Outside, the bells of St. Mary's ring out. The cobbled streets are wet with rain, the smell of wet straw and horse dung drifting in. You lean against the warm wooden wall, feeling the heat seep into your bones, trying to ignore the sound of coughing in the corner. And you drift on the contradiction that something meant to clean, to comfort, could carry so much fear. Now you find yourself in Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire, around the 11th century. You walk through narrow, marble-paved alleys, catching glimpses of tiled roofs and slender minarets. You enter a balneum, a public bath that's been in use for centuries. The smell is exotic and strangely reassuring. Olive oil soap, warm stone, perfumed oils. Inside, attendants in simple linen tunics move silently, ladling water, scrubbing marble benches. The space echoes with hushed conversation in Greek and Armenian, Latin and Arabic, a true crossroads of the world. You see merchants discussing trade deals as they soak, priests washing carefully before services, even women in a separate section, chattering behind screens, giggling as they share local gossip. Here, bathing is a duty and a pleasure, part of civic life. The empire takes pride in its Roman heritage. Baths aren't decadent, they're civilized. You listen to a teacher explaining to his student that cleanliness is next to wisdom itself. But fear is creeping in here too. The city has seen plague, waves of it. Memories of Justinian's plague still haunt the chronicles. When disease strikes, some baths close. Priests lead processions begging God's mercy. Doctors debate whether the heat invites pestilence. You hear an old man explain solemnly to his grandson that while a cool bath is safe, hot steam is risky. It opens you, he says, lets in the bad air. You watch the boy nod, wide-eyed, clutching a sliver of soap. The bath's marble walls are damp with condensation. Oil lamps cast dancing shadows. You feel the warmth seep into your bones, smell the crushed laurel leaves, and you realize that even here, in one of the world's grandest cities, with its libraries and scholars, fear can cling to water like steam to stone. You let the sound of dripping water lull you, the quiet shuffle of bare feet on marble, and drift on the idea that the tension between comfort and fear is universal. You wander to rural France in the 17th century. No grand city bathhouse here, just a humble cottage with smoke curling from its thatched roof, the smell of wet earth and livestock thick in the air. Inside, a family prepares for their yearly bath. Yes, yearly. You see the old wooden tub dragged out from its corner, the water heated in battered pots over the hearth. The father pours it carefully, testing the heat with his scarred hand. He mutters about not making it too hot, recalling what the priest said last Sunday. Hot water invites sin and sickness. The mother adds lavender from the garden, a small indulgence. She whispers to the children to hush, to be grateful. They take turns, oldest to youngest. The water grows murkier each time. You hear giggles quickly hushed with sharp looks. No one wants the neighbours to know they're bathing. Too much vanity is suspect. A local healer stops by. She peers into the tub, sniffs the water. She frowns, but says nothing. Better unwashed than dead of fever, she seems to think. Outside, you hear the wind rustle dry leaves. A dog howls far off. The night smells of smoke and damp straw. Inside, the tub water is cool now, scummy at the edges. They finish quickly, wiping themselves with rough cloth. The children shiver. You see the father pour the water onto the dirt floor outside, watching it sink into the earth like a secret. No one talks about next time, no one wants to. You lean against the cottage wall, the warmth of the hearth on your face, and wonder about the cost of fear. You drift on the crackle of the fire, the smell of wet wool, the quiet relief that for tonight at least they tried to be clean. Now you're in Renaissance Venice. The canals reflect lantern light in rippling gold, the air rich with salt and sewage. You step into a private chamber in a merchant's palazzo. The room is tiled in cool green and white, a small copper tub gleaming in the corner. A servant hauls buckets of hot water, panting from the effort. He mixes it carefully with cooler water until it's just right. The merchant's wife sits waiting, robed in fine linen, her hair bound up to keep it dry. She dips a toe, shivers. She's read the doctor's letter. Hot bathing may invite fevers. Use tepid water, sponge only if weak. She frowns but gestures to continue. The servant begins sponging her arms, careful not to let the water splash. The smell of imported rosewater fills the room, expensive, reassuring. Outside the window, the bells of San Marco toll softly. Gondoliers call to each other in the fog. The doctor arrives for a house call. He nods approvingly at the cool water. Very prudent, he says. He prescribes a regimen of dry scrubbing with rosemary powder. You see the woman glance at the tub with disappointment, but she obeys. Bathhouses in Venice have closed repeatedly during plague years, their doors nailed shut by edict. Water meant danger. Nakedness tempted sin. Yet people want to be clean. They compromise. Half measures, tepid baths, sponging, dry rubs. You hear the servant wring out the cloth, water dripping into the basin. It sounds like confession. You close your eyes, listening to the splash, the hush of silk against marble, the wind moaning off the lagoon, and you drift on the question of how much comfort people were willing to surrender for fear of death. Finally, you're in Russia in the 16th century, outside a rural banya, a bathhouse built of rough-hewn logs, smoke curling from a stone stove inside. The air is freezing, your breath frosting before you. You hear laughter and loud, cheerful shouts from within. You push open the creaking door and are hit with a wave of heat. The banya is alive. Steam fills the air, heavy with the scent of birch and wet wood. People are gathered close, slapping each other with birch branches, venic, to improve circulation, drive out illness. No fear here. Bathing is part of life, even survival. The priest visits weekly to bless the banya, acknowledging its role in health and community. You see old women cackling as they pour boiling water over hot stones. Children shrieking with delight as steam rises in thick clouds. A man scrubs his back with a birch broom, red-faced and grinning. Yet outside, rumours swirl about witchcraft. Superstitious villagers claim witches hold Sabbaths in the banya at night. They warn not to enter after dark, lest you meet the devil himself. But people shrug. The banya is too important. They'll risk spirits for warmth and cleanliness. You feel the heat seep into your bones, the sweat bead on your skin. The air is so wet it clings to you like a second skin. You listen to the hiss of water on stones, the sharp slap of branches, the rumble of low conversation. And you realize that here, bathing is defiance, a promise to stay human, to stay clean, even in the harshest winters. You close your eyes, feeling the heat press against your eyelids, and you drift, knowing that for some, fear could never quite drown out the need for warmth and water. You're in Prague in the late 15th century, standing at the edge of a muddy street where the city walls loom tall and forbidding. The air smells of damp earth, coal smoke, and too many people living too close together. You push open the door of a modest bathhouse. It's dimly lit with tallow candles, the walls darkened by years of soot. Inside, the air is thick with steam, laced with the tang of vinegar and herbs meant to purify. The clientele is wary. You hear low conversations about plague rumours in the south. A baker and a tailor argue softly about whether to risk the hot pool. The owner tries to reassure them, showing the water being ladled carefully, fresh herbs bobbing on top. A city ordinance tacked to the wall says the baths must close immediately if plague is reported within 2 leagues. No one knows if that will be tomorrow or next year. You listen to the hiss of water hitting hot iron cauldrons. The scrubbing sounds are almost soothing, but you can feel the tension. A man clutches his crucifix as he lowers himself in. Another refuses entirely, insisting on only a sponge bath with cool vinegar rinse. The bath attendants work with brisk, professional calm. They swap dirty water for clean, mop the slippery floors, try to keep the chatter light, but fear seeps in like the chill under the door. Outside, church bells toll the hours. The city guard passes by, boots squelching in mud. You hear a woman scolding her son not to look at the bathhouse. Too many sins, she says. Too many naked bodies inviting God's wrath. Inside, someone sneezes. The whole room goes quiet. You hear water drip from a bucket, the crack of settling timbers. You close your eyes and imagine the smell of rosemary fighting the stink of fear, and you drift, realizing that for these bathers, cleanliness isn't about luxury. It's an argument with death itself, negotiated one ladle of water at a time. Now you're in Ottoman Istanbul in the 16th century, standing in the marble atrium of a hammam, so grand it could be mistaken for a palace. The air is warm, fragrant with rose oil and steam. Light slants through high stained glass windows in jewel tones. You hear water trickling in fountains, the low hum of conversation in Turkish, Greek, Armenian. Here, bathing is civic duty, ritual, pleasure all at once. You step into the warm room and see men sprawled on heated marble slabs, attendants scrubbing them with coarse kase mitts, the scraping rhythmic and almost hypnotic. You hear laughter, bargaining, philosophical debates. An imam quotes the Prophet on the virtues of cleanliness. A merchant complains about shipping tariffs between splashes. You watch water sluice over polished marble, channeling centuries of tradition. No one here seems afraid of bathing. Even when plague visited Istanbul, and it did, the hammams rarely closed for long. Officials sometimes imposed rules: fewer customers, more scrubbing, burning aromatic resins to cleanse the air. But the baths reopened, always. They were too important to close. Women have their own section, separated by carved wooden screens. You hear giggles, gossip about marriages, lamentations about dowries. The scent of jasmine soap drifts your way. Attendants move with quiet skill, replacing buckets of hot water, offering cool drinks. You press your hand to the warm marble, feeling it hold centuries of heat, and you listen to the soft echo of voices in a chamber designed for comfort, humility, and shared humanity. Even here, there were rumors that plague spread in steam, that demons hid in heated air, but people bathed anyway. You close your eyes, hearing the gentle trickle of fountains, the slap of water on stone, and you drift, warmed by the knowledge that in some places, fear never quite overcame the love of water. You find yourself in a small English village in the 17th century. The cottages are clustered around a muddy green. Smoke rises from chimneys in lazy curls, the scent of peat and damp wool hanging heavy. Inside one of these cottages, a family debates whether to bathe at all this season. The father shakes his head. No call for it, he says. Doctor says heat opens the body to foul airs. The Lord sends fevers to the proud. The mother looks longingly at the kettle warming on the hearth. She stirs it anyway, adding a sprig of rosemary. The children watch, wide-eyed, hoping she'll relent. But she sighs and takes up a cloth instead. Sponge baths only. She rubs their arms with the warm, lightly scented water. It's not enough, but it will have to do. You hear the fire pop and hiss. The wind rattles the shutters. The dog shifts in the corner, snuffling in its sleep. Outside, a neighbour pounds on the door. He's heard of a new death in the next village over. They argue in hushed tones. Close the windows. Bar the door. No visitors. The kettle cools on the hearth. Forgotten. The chance for a proper soak dies quietly. You see the father scrub his own arms with vinegar, muttering a prayer. He winces at the sting, but refuses to admit it feels clean. You watch the mother pour the leftover water onto the packed dirt floor. The steam rises briefly before disappearing into the chill, and you drift on the silence that follows, realizing that for them, fear was stronger than the promise of warmth. Now you're in Paris again, but it's the 17th century, well past the days of the lively stews and their scandalous reputation. The bathhouses have been mostly shut down, their timbers rotting, doors nailed shut by edict during plagues that swept through like judgment itself. You stand in the narrow lane where one once stood, weeds pushing up between cobbles. A faded sign swings in the wind, creaking mournfully. You hear old men gossiping about how their grandfathers remembered the place alive with heat and laughter. Could get a hot soak, a decent scrub, one mutters, and a bit of sin on the side if you had the coin. Now, no one dares. Water is suspect. Heat is suspect. Inside homes, bathing has become a delicate ritual of compromise. A servant carries in warm water in small copper basins. A nobleman stands stiffly while his valet sponges him down with linen cloths dipped in lavender and vinegar. He complains about the chill, but insists on no hot soaks. The family doctor warned sternly against it. You listen to the water drip into the basin, the valet's muttered apologies. The old house creaks like it's sharing a secret. Outside, the city is noisy with carriages and market shouts, but here, in this darkened room, bathing feels like confession. And you drift on the hush, hearing only the scrape of cloth on skin, the soft prayer for safety from pestilence. You step into an inn on the edge of the Alps in the 16th century. The air is sharp outside, filled with the promise of snow. Inside, it's smoky, with the scent of pine logs crackling in a stone hearth. Travellers cluster around the fire, boots steaming, breath frosting in the cold air. A tired innkeeper pours ale, listens to complaints about the mountain passes being blocked. In a small back room, there's a wooden tub, battered but serviceable. Water heats over iron pots, steam curling toward the low rafters. A merchant negotiates for a bath. Not too hot, he insists. Doctor says it weakens the humours. The innkeeper rolls his eyes but complies, ladling carefully. Another traveller refuses entirely, wiping his face and neck with a cold, damp cloth. He claims he doesn't want to die of fever. The room smells of wet wood, old soap, sweat. The wind howls outside like a warning. The merchant eases in finally, sighing despite himself. He closes his eyes, the steam softening his lined face. For a moment he forgets the fear. You watch the water lap gently at the sides of the tub, catching the glow of the firelight. But when he's done, he hurries to dry off. Can't linger, mustn't risk it. The innkeeper drains the tub onto frozen ground outside, where it steams briefly before vanishing into the snow. You lean against the wall, feeling the heat from the hearth seep into your back. And you drift, listening to the crackle of logs and the quiet argument between fear and comfort that even a humble bath could spark. You're in a small Scottish burg in the early 18th century, the wind off the North Sea rattling the shutters, bringing with it the smell of salt, peat smoke, and damp wool. You duck into a modest stone cottage where a family is preparing for the ordeal of washing day. Not clothes, bodies. The mother heats water in iron pots over the hearth. The children watch with mixed dread and excitement. Bathing is a rare event, saved for special occasions or health emergencies. You hear the father caution them not to make it too hot. Heat draws the sickness out, he says ominously, but it can invite it in too. He sits by the hearth, mending a net, sniffing the air warily. The smell of boiling water seems unnatural, threatening. The tub is wooden, leaking slightly. They line it with old cloth to stop the worst of the drips. The mother ladles in the water, tests it with a cautious finger, tepid at best. One by one they take turns, the oldest first. She gasps at the chill, scrubs quickly with coarse soap that smells of tallow and lye. The water grows cloudy. By the time the youngest enters, it's barely warm, littered with floating dirt and soap scum. He splashes half-heartedly, giggles, then sneezes. The father crosses himself, muttering a prayer against ague. You watch them pour the grey water out the door, where it seeps into frozen ground. Steam rises briefly in the frigid air before disappearing entirely. They settle around the fire afterward, drying themselves with rough homespun cloth. The father tells them they won't do this again for months. Too risky, too extravagant. Outside, the wind howls like a banshee. The shutters rattle again. You lean against the low lintel, feeling the heat of the fire, watching the glow play over tired faces, and wonder how something as simple as a bath could become an act of courage. You close your eyes, letting the wind's howl become a lullaby, and you drift, comforted and unsettled in equal measure. Now you're in Florence during the height of the Renaissance, the 15th century. The city brims with art and intellect, but even here bathing is a fraught subject. You stand in the tiled courtyard of a wealthy banker's villa, the scent of lemons and damp earth all around. Inside, a private bathing chamber awaits, white marble tub, brass fittings gleaming in the candlelight. But tonight it's only for show. The banker paces, listening to his physician. No immersion, the doctor says firmly. Too much heat. It draws out the humours. The miasmas will enter through your pores. Instead, he prescribes dry rubbing. The banker scowls but obeys. Servants bring linen steeped in vinegar and crushed rosemary. He stands stiffly while they scrub him like a piece of furniture. You hear the scratch of rough cloth against skin. The banker winces but says nothing. Outside, the city is alive. Masks in the piazza, the clang of bells from the Duomo, laughter in wine shops. But fear of plague shadows every corner. Even Michelangelo would have known that terror. Even Machiavelli would have weighed public health against personal indulgence. Bathhouses have largely vanished. Some were converted to storehouses, others torn down as dens of sin. You see the banker's face in the candlelight, proud, worried. He wants to be clean, but not too clean. He wants health, but not temptation. You listen to the quiet drip of cooling water in an unused tub. The air smells sharply of vinegar, masking the fear underneath. And you drift on the thought that even in the cradle of the Renaissance, the battle between reason and superstition was fought on the wet stone floor of a bath. You travel to a village in Bavaria in the early 16th century. The Alps loom in the distance, capped in white. The air is crisp and smells of pine and wood smoke. You enter a small communal bathhouse, a rarity that survived church disapproval and local suspicion by sheer stubborn practicality. Inside, it's warm, walls blackened by decades of fire and steam. Benches line the walls. A great copper cauldron bubbles over a fire, ready to refresh the bathwater. You see men and women alike, old traditions dying hard, soaking in separate corners, eyes averted. Conversation is subdued but friendly. A local priest visits. He frowns but does not forbid it outright. Instead, he warns them to keep the temperature low. Too much heat, he says, opens the body to the plague. Someone coughs and the room goes quiet. The bath attendant hastily sprinkles rosemary in the water. You hear whispered gossip about another village where everyone took to bed last month, about how they closed their bathhouse entirely. But these villagers are stubborn. The winters are too harsh. Lice, scabies, infection thrive in dirt. They need this. A woman scrubs her child's hair vigorously, ignoring the priest's frown. A man sighs as he soaks aching joints. Outside, the wind howls down from the mountains, rattling the shutters. You can smell the cold waiting to pounce. Inside, steam curls around bare shoulders. The fire crackles. You lean back against the rough timber wall, feeling the heat on your face, listening to quiet conversation that's half defiance, half prayer. And you drift, knowing that here, bathing is a promise not to surrender completely to fear. You step into a noble household in Elizabethan England. The air is musty with rushes scattered on the floor, mixed with lavender to fight the smell of the chamber pot nearby. In a corner of the chamber stands a large wooden tub, lined with canvas to stop leaks. It's filled with water gone lukewarm, floating petals for show. The lady of the house sits stiffly, her shift bunched around her knees. Two maids attend her, dipping cloths in the water, wiping her arms and face with perfumed precision. She'd like a full soak, but the family physician forbade it. Opens the pores, he says, allows pestilence in. He recommended a dry rub with linen and herbs instead, but today is a compromise, a gentle sponging, enough to feel clean, but not to risk anything. You watch the maids work carefully. They avoid her eyes. The water in the tub is almost untouched. She sighs. Her gown hangs nearby, silk, stiff with embroidery. She'll be presentable at court tonight. No one must suspect the discomfort, the fear that hides beneath the perfume. Outside, London is alive with cries of vendors, the rattle of carts, the stench of too many bodies in too little space. Rumours of plague ebb and flow like the Thames itself, bills of mortality posted on church doors, bonfires lit to cleanse the air. You hear the crackle of the hearth, the rustle of starched linen, and you drift on the hush that follows, knowing even the powerful feared the promise of hot water. You're in Spain during the height of the Inquisition. The smell of incense and hot wax fills the darkened church where confessions are heard in murmured Spanish and Catalan. But your path leads you outside, into a courtyard where a once grand hammam stands abandoned. The tiles are chipped but still beautiful, geometric patterns in blue and green that catch the fading light. Once, Muslims, Christians and Jews bathed here. Conversation in many languages, steam rising, water splashing in marble basins. Cleanliness was both piety and hospitality. But now the doors are barred. A sign proclaims it closed for the health of the faithful. Inside, it's cold and quiet. Dust lies thick. Spiders weave in corners. The basins are dry and cracked. You hear a priest in the plaza preaching about impurity, about how the Moors tempted God with their sensual customs. He warns against dangerous cleanliness, says it leads to sin. A woman listening crosses herself but looks longingly at the locked door, she remembers. You run your fingers over a cracked mosaic, feel the grit, see the faded beauty. Water once flowed freely here, olive oil soap scented with lavender and rose. Now it's a warning, a testament to fear, to conquest, to suspicion of anything that smells too foreign, too indulgent. You listen to the priest's voice fade behind you, the wind hissing through dry grass, and you drift, remembering that even a bath could become a battleground. You find yourself in late medieval Sweden, in a small timber settlement hemmed by dark pine forests. The wind whistles through the trees like a warning, carrying the scent of resin and smoke. You push open the creaking door of a bastu, the communal sauna bath. The interior is dim, lit by the glow of hot stones piled in an iron brazier. Steam curls thick and wet, scented with birch sap and moss. Families sit wrapped in linen towels, sweat beading on their foreheads. A mother uses a birch whisk to slap her husband's back, encouraging the blood to flow. Children giggle at the stinging warmth. Outside, the snow piles high against the logs. The cold is absolute, biting at anyone who lingers too long at the threshold. The local priest visits from time to time, warning of temptation. Too much nakedness, too much sin. He insists sin can slip in like air through a crack in the door, but no one here truly listens. The bastu is medicine, it's gossip, it's ritual, it's survival. You watch someone toss water onto the stones. The hiss is thunderous in the small room. Steam billows. For a moment, the world disappears into white heat. A healer crouches by the door mixing herbs into a bucket. Juniper, thyme, mugwort. She claims it drives out fever. No one argues. Outside, wolves howl in the forest. Inside, bodies gleam with sweat. The air so wet it feels like another skin. They'll plunge into snow later, screaming with laughter, hearts pounding. Then back inside, red-faced, shivering, alive. You close your eyes against the steam, feel it in your lungs, hear the creak of settling logs, and you drift, warmed by the knowledge that in some places, fear could never freeze out the need for heat and humanity. Now you're in the Holy Roman Empire, the 16th century, in a bustling town along the Rhine. The streets are noisy with traders and apprentices shouting in dialects thick as porridge. You step into a public badstube, a bathhouse still clinging to old prestige. The wooden sign swings above the door, creaking in the river wind. Inside, it's warm, smoky, alive with chatter. Town councillors, merchants, even journeymen crowd the benches, stripping down with embarrassed laughter. The bath attendant stirs a giant copper pot over the hearth, skimming off scum with practiced ease. Rosemary and sage bob on the surface. You listen to gossip swirling like steam, tax disputes, the bishop's rumoured mistress, that travelling doctor selling mercury pills. But under it all is worry. The town posted plague warnings at the gates. Some stay away, convinced heat and steam are invitations to death. A barber surgeon sits in a corner sharpening his razors. He offers to lance boils or bleed you after your bath. Best to balance your humours, he says with grave assurance. You watch a man hesitate at the water's edge. He fingers his crucifix, muttering about miasmas. He soaks anyway, though, can't quite give it up. Outside, bells toll the hours. River barges groan at the docks. You lean against the warm planks, listening to water slap gently against wooden sides. The whole place feels like a holdover from another time. And you drift, wondering how much fear people could stand before surrendering to the promise of hot water. You travel to late medieval Ireland, a damp green land of fog and chill winds. The village is a huddle of thatched roofs in a sea of rain-slicked grass. Bathing here is rare, whispered about with suspicion. The priest rails against it in Sunday sermons, claiming that nakedness tempts the devil. You stand in a cramped cottage, low ceiling blackened with smoke. A mother pours water into a small wooden tub. It's more for the sick child than anything else. She sprinkles dried herbs, angelica, mugwort. She murmurs prayers in Irish, half Christian, half older magic. The child shivers as he's lowered in. The father stands watch, wary of neighbours' gossip. They'll say we're witches, he mutters. Outside, the wind moans through the hedgerows. Peat smoke drifts, acrid and comforting. There are no public baths here. Those are foreign notions, for towns, for the English maybe. Here, water is for livestock, for ale, for fighting fire, not for indulgence. You hear the mother hush the child's crying, her voice catching. She's afraid. Fevers come without warning. The wise woman says bathing might help, or might make it worse. They risk it anyway. You watch the water grow cloudy, the herbs swirling like ghosts. When it's done, they pour it onto the muddy yard. The steam vanishes instantly into the cold air. You lean against the doorframe, feeling the damp seep into your bones, listening to the wind's quiet judgment. And you drift, reflecting on a place where cleanliness itself was seen as foreign danger. Now you're in 17th century Amsterdam. The city hums with commerce, the canals reflecting lantern light like molten gold. But you're not in a merchant's grand house tonight. You're in a narrow alley standing outside a stoven, a small urban bathhouse barely hanging on. Inside, the walls are tiled in Delft blue, cracked in places. The air is humid, the smell a mix of lye soap and city filth. A handful of patrons soak silently. Their eyes flick to the door every time it opens, as if checking for inspectors. The city council has posted rules on the door. No bathing during pestilence. Fines are heavy, but the bath stays open, quietly, secretly. The bathkeeper watches the street nervously. He knows the risk. Fines, prison, accusations of spreading plague. But people come. They can't help it. The cold is unkind. The canals freeze over. Dirt gathers in the seams of collars and cuffs. Lice flourish. A merchant's wife enters quietly, cloaked and veiled. She pays double to reserve a corner tub, instructs the attendant to keep the water merely warm, not hot. Her physician says tepid is safer. She scrubs quickly, eyes darting, ashamed of wanting to be clean. Outside you hear canal ice creaking, the wind off the Zuiderzee rattling shutters. Inside, water splashes softly, a candle gutters. You lean against the tiled wall, cool against your back, watching steam rise and vanish like unspoken prayers, and you drift, realizing that fear of death couldn't quite snuff out the human longing for warmth. You find yourself in the Mughal Empire, early 17th century, standing in the lush courtyard of a hammam in Agra. The air is heavy with the scent of jasmine and wet stone. Inside, domed ceilings trap heat. Sunlight filters through latticed windows in patterns on the marble floor. Servants move with quiet precision, ladling water over patrons reclining on heated platforms. The emperor himself has private baths lined with onyx, inlaid with semi-precious stones. Cleanliness is not just habit, but status, piety, refinement. You listen to a scholar debate the virtues of daily washing. The prophet himself praised it. Attendants scrub backs with perfumed paste of sandalwood and turmeric. Brass basins gleam in the lamplight. The sound of running water is like music. But fear creeps even here. There are edicts about quarantines, rumours of new fevers travelling along caravan routes. Physicians warn of balancing humours with careful diet, moderate heat. A nobleman lowers himself into a tub and calls for cooler water, muttering about avoiding corrupted air. Yet the hammam remains full. Conversation hums in Persian and Hindustani. Business deals are struck. Poetry is recited. You smell rose oil, hear the splash of water over marble, feel the gentle damp heat on your skin. Outside, peacocks call in the courtyard. The world seems far away, slowed to the pace of dripping water. You lean against a carved pillar, feeling its coolness seep into you, listening to the hush of old stone holding centuries of steam, and you drift, comforted that even at empire's height people argued with fear by choosing to bathe. You're in Edo period Japan, early 18th century, standing on a narrow street lined with paper lanterns swaying in the breeze. The air is cool, scented with wood smoke and grilled fish. You slide open the door of a neighborhood sento, a public bath that glows invitingly. Inside, it's simple but clean, cedar tubs steaming gently, polished wooden floors, baskets for folded yukata. Men and women bathe in separate rooms. The attendants bow politely, offering soaproot powder and buckets of water drawn from an iron kettle. You hear hushed conversation, neighbors trading gossip about rice prices, a marriage proposal, a new tax from the shogunate. Children giggle as they splash carefully, knowing a scolding awaits if they're too loud. Bathing is daily ritual here, not luxury, not sin. Yet even here, there is worry. In years of cholera or smallpox, town elders debate closing the sento. Notices warn of impure air. Physicians urge caution, recommend cooler water to avoid weakening the body. Some refuse to bathe in public at all, claiming they can ward off illness with daily rice vinegar rubs at home. You watch an old man scrub his back with a long-handled brush, sighing with relief. His knotted muscles relax. His grandson dutifully fetches another bucket of hot water. Outside, temple bells toll the hour. The wind rattles bamboo screens. Inside, water sloshes softly, steam rises in graceful ribbons. The light is gentle, lanterns casting warm halos. You lean back against the wooden wall, feeling the heat soak into you, listening to the water drip steadily. And you drift, reflecting that here, bathing is an act of calm defiance, of balance, of remembering what it is to feel human. Now you're in Ottoman-controlled Cairo in the 17th century, on a street that bustles even at dusk. Vendors shout, brass lanterns glow, the air carries the scent of roasting lamb and sweet tobacco. You step into a hammam, its worn marble threshold cool underfoot. Inside, the air is a cloud of steam and perfume, rosewater, frankincense, citrus peel. Men sit on warm stone benches wrapped in thin towels, attendants scrubbing them with brisk competence. Conversations swirl in Arabic, Turkish, Greek, a babble of trade, politics, poetry. This bath is ancient, part of civic life. A scribe describes the Ottoman Sultan ordering new hammams built in distant provinces, proclaiming cleanliness a duty. But plague has come before, and fear is never gone. Old men argue softly about whether steam invites sickness. An imam counsels moderation, not too hot, not too long. The bathkeeper sprinkles herbs on the brazier to cleanse the air. He watches the doors carefully. City authorities once tried to close them during epidemics, but they reopened in days. You watch an elderly merchant recline against warm marble, eyes half shut. He seems to weigh the risk and chooses comfort anyway. Outside, the muezzin calls the faithful to prayer. The city seems to hold its breath in the cool desert dusk. Inside, water drips steadily into carved basins. You press your hand to the damp marble wall, feeling centuries of heat, and you drift on the hush, the steam, the whispered arguments with fear that never quite won. You find yourself in early 19th century New England. The air is sharp with salt from the nearby harbour, wood smoke hanging in the cold dusk. You're in a farmhouse kitchen where water is heating in a blackened iron kettle over an open hearth. The tub is a small oval of battered tin brought in from the barn. It's bath night. But it's an ordeal, not a pleasure. You watch the mother pour steaming water carefully into the tub, mixing in colder water from a bucket. She warns the children not to splash. Water must be carried in. Wood must be chopped to heat it. The father stands watch, reading from a book of medical advice. Avoid extremes. Tepid bathing preserves the health. Hot baths exhaust the nerves. The children fidget as they're scrubbed with rough cloths and homemade lye soap. The smell is sharp, almost acrid. They yelp at the cold air, the hot water turning lukewarm too fast. Outside, wind rattles the shutters. A dog howls in the distance. No one here believes bathing is sinful, but they fear its expense in effort and fuel, its supposed risks to the lungs. You see the mother sigh, rubbing her chapped hands. She whispers that it feels good to see them clean, even if it means her back will ache all night. The father drains the water out the door, where it freezes instantly on the stoop. Inside, the fire pops, the room smells of soap and wet wool. You lean against the rough beams, watching the steam fade, listening to the quiet sigh of exhausted children. And you drift, warmed by the idea that even hardship couldn't extinguish the stubborn hope of feeling clean. Now you're in Mughal India once more, but this time in a smaller town, far from the emperor's grand courts. You stand in a hammam that has seen better days. Cracked marble floors, chipped basins. The smell is still lovely. Sandalwood, damp stone, old rose petals. Families arrive with copper vessels. Attendants heat water over small charcoal stoves. It's a communal space, but with quiet respect. Men bathe in one chamber, women in another. You hear soft laughter as mothers scrub children. An old man chants a verse from the Quran while an attendant rubs his back with turmeric paste. But there's tension. Rumours swirl of cholera upriver. A physician sits near the door, instructing people to use cooler water. Steam draws sickness, he warns. Some heed him. Others mutter that cleanliness is protection, that God loves the pure. You watch the negotiation play out in heated whispers and lowered eyes. Outside, the sun beats on dusty streets. Donkeys bray, sellers hawk ripe mangoes. Inside, water splashes gently in brass basins. Steam curls in lazy spirals toward the cracked dome. You lean against the cool wall, feeling the ghost of heat seep into you, listening to the steady drip of water. And you drift on the thought that even fear cannot quite drive out the desire for ritual and relief. Finally, you find yourself in revolutionary France. The year is 1793. Paris is a city in terror, rumours thick as the smoke from countless chimneys. You walk down a narrow street near the Seine, past men arguing about liberty and equality, past women whispering about the guillotine. You arrive at a public bath, once elegant, now neglected. The door creaks. Inside, it's cavernous, walls stained with mildew, the air clammy and cold. A few brave souls bathe quickly, eyes darting to the door as if expecting a revolutionary tribunal to storm in and demand explanations. A man hisses that bathing is aristocratic, dangerous, indulgent, but he strips anyway, desperate to feel clean for an hour. You hear the attendant mutter about shortages. Wood is expensive, soap scarce, water not always clean. Someone suggests closing the place. We have better things to do than scrub our backs while enemies of the people plot. But others shake their heads. They need it. Disease stalks the crowded city. Dirt brings lice. Lice bring typhus. A woman wraps her thin shawl tighter, watching her child splash in the water with guilty delight. Outside, distant shouting rises, a mob calling for bread, for blood. Inside, the water ripples softly, catching candlelight in sad golden patterns. You lean against the damp wall, listening to the water lap, the murmured arguments that trail off into resignation. And you drift, understanding that even in the shadow of the guillotine, people still fought for the smallest comfort of a warm bath. You're in a Prussian village in the early 19th century, the fields outside crusted with frost under a heavy grey sky. The smell of manure, wood smoke and damp wool hangs in the air. You step into a farmhouse where the family has gathered for the monthly wash. Water heats in a black pot over the hearth, the fire crackling wearily as if it too is reluctant to work. The tub is small, battered tin. They'll share it in turn, oldest to youngest. The father warns, not too hot. Doctor says it opens the skin to sickness. He sits sharpening a knife, watching the steam warily. The mother tests the water, frowning. Too cool is miserable. Too hot is dangerous. She splits the difference. The oldest son clambers in first, goose flesh rising. He hisses as the cloth scrubs over old cuts and bruises. Soap made from animal fat and lye burns his skin, leaving behind the acrid scent of harsh cleanliness. They reuse the water, adding more hot from the kettle. By the last child, it's a greyish soup. Outside, you hear wind batter the shutters. A dog barks somewhere in the night. No one here thinks bathing is sinful, but they think it's risky, luxurious, maybe even foolish. The mother sighs as she wrings out the cloth. She remembers village talk of families who bathed too often and caught their deaths. When they're done, the father hauls the water to the door and dumps it onto the frozen yard. Steam curls for an instant before the cold devours it. Inside, the children huddle near the fire, damp and shivering, but clean. You lean against a beam, watching the glow of embers on tired faces, listening to the pop of drying wood. And you drift, realizing that even these small ablutions were acts of bravery against the creeping dark. Now you're in early Victorian London, 1840s. The fog curls through narrow lanes, thick with soot and coal dust. Gas lamps burn like tired eyes in the gloom. You slip into a public bathhouse tucked between a gin shop and a rag dealer. It advertises itself grandly, penny wash for the poor. Inside, the air is damp and sour. Rows of tin tubs line a long room. Attendants in rolled-up sleeves shout over each other, hauling buckets from a giant central boiler that wheezes like an asthmatic giant. People wait their turn with wary resignation. A mother soothes a crying baby, insisting the warm water won't hurt him. A navvy scrubs dirt from his forearms with gritty soap, wincing as old cuts sting. You hear mutters about cholera, about miasmas, about how some doctors say hot water weakens the body, but no one seems eager to stop. Bathing is not pleasure here, it's defence. A government inspector arrives, nose wrinkled. He demands the boiler temperature be lowered to prevent scalding. The attendant curses under his breath and obeys. You see water slosh onto the grimy floor, pooling in cracked tiles. Rats scuttle along the walls. Outside, carts rattle over cobbles. Costermongers hawk wilted produce. A bell tolls in the distance for another funeral. But in here, for a moment, people feel almost safe, almost clean. You lean against the cold wall, watching steam rise and vanish into the rafters. And you drift, listening to the shouts, the laughter, the arguments about cost and health and dignity, all for a few minutes of hot water. You find yourself in a Russian peasant village in the late 19th century. Snow covers the earth like a heavy quilt, muffling the world in freezing silence. You trudge to the village banya, a low wooden building at the edge of the settlement. Smoke leaks from the chimney, the scent of birch and damp earth heavy in the still air. Inside, it's dim and steamy. Wooden benches line the walls. A giant stone stove radiates heat, hissing as ladles of water strike the glowing rocks. Families sit wrapped in towels, red-faced, chatting in low voices. Children laugh as their mothers slap them with birch switches, leaves scattering like green confetti. This is ritual, tradition, medicine. Yet even here, suspicion exists. An old man mutters that too much heat weakens the blood. A woman insists steam cures fevers, drives away bad air. The village priest sometimes preaches against mixed bathing, too much temptation, too pagan, but tonight he's not here. You watch a father stand, sweat streaming down his chest, and stride outside barefoot into the snow. He screams with exhilaration before dashing back in, steaming like a kettle. The smell of wood smoke and hot sap clings to everything. Water pools on the wooden floor, darkening the planks. Someone sings a folk song in a slow, drowsy voice. The words are old as the hills, promising health, fortune, survival. Outside, wolves howl in the blackness. You lean against the warm logs, feeling heat sink into your bones, and you drift, realizing that even in the hardest winters, people clung to the comfort of steam and tradition. Now you're in colonial Boston, late 18th century. The harbour is alive with creaking masts, gull cries, and the tang of salt. You stand in the back room of a tavern where a wash tub has been hauled in for a paying customer. The floor is dirt, the walls rough planks. Water is heated in iron pots over the kitchen hearth. It's a slow, miserable process. Wood is scarce, expensive. The patron waits impatiently, reading a battered newspaper that warns of fevers sweeping the colonies. The tavern keeper's wife pours the steaming water carefully into the tub, adding cold to make it tepid as recommended by her almanac. You watch him test it with a scowl. Not too hot. Doctor says it's unhealthy. He grumbles about the price but strips anyway. The smell of sweat and stale ale rises as he scrubs his arms, chest, neck with harsh soap. Outside, horses clop over frozen mud. A bell rings from the meeting house. Inside, the hearth pops and smokes. Shadows dance on the walls. The tavern keeper leans in to watch, arms crossed. He charges extra for privacy, but not too much. No one wants to seem proud. You hear water slosh, soap scrape skin. The man shivers despite the steam. When he's done, the keeper's wife hauls the grey water out and dumps it into the street, where it runs into the gutter alongside horse manure and refuse. You lean against a beam, smelling the mix of soap and smoke, listening to the wind batter the walls. And you drift, thinking how even the promise of warmth was met with suspicion, negotiation, and compromise. Finally, you're in the French countryside during the Napoleonic Wars. The village is quiet, except for distant cannon rumbles echoing over fields gone fallow. You enter a stone cottage where a family debates whether to bother with a bath at all. The father sits sharpening a sickle, shaking his head. "Soldiers spread sickness," he mutters. "Bathing opens you up to it." The mother stirs a pot of water over the hearth, biting her lip. She remembers a doctor passing through who urged cleanliness, warned of typhus. The children watch with wide eyes, hoping. Water is precious. Wood is too. She compromises. Sponge baths only. She soaks linen in warm water, wrings it carefully, wipes their arms, faces, necks. The smell of lavender floats briefly, defiant in the smoky gloom. Outside, a patrol passes on the road, horses snorting clouds in the chill. Inside, the fire crackles. Shadows move over whitewashed walls. You hear the mother hum a lullaby as she cleans each child. The father stops sharpening long enough to watch silently, eyes tired. When it's done, she pours the leftover water onto the packed earth floor, where it vanishes into dust. No tub, no soak, just enough to claim they tried. You lean against the cool stone wall, listening to the hush that follows. And you drift, realizing that even in war, even in fear, people tried to remember what it meant to be clean. You're in Vienna in the mid-18th century, capital of an empire polished to a Baroque shine. Outside, grand carriages roll over cobbles. The scent of roasting chestnuts mingles with the smoke from coal fires. You enter the servants' quarters of a noble townhouse. The walls are close, ceilings low, the smell of damp linen and cabbage stew hanging thick. Bathing day is rare. Water is hauled in from the courtyard pump, freezing cold even in summer. Tonight they heat it in battered copper pots over small hearths. The chambermaid whispers that the mistress of the house forbids full immersion. The doctor warned it opens the pores. Instead, the staff must wash by sponge, quick and modest. You watch them line up, shivering as they scrub with rough soap. The lye burns cracked skin, leaving a harsh, clean smell. One old cook laughs bitterly, saying she remembers her mother using ashes from the hearth mixed with rainwater. Cheaper, harsher. In the main house, the lady of the manor sits stiffly while her maid dabs her arms with rosewater-soaked cloths. The tub in her chamber is mostly decorative. Its brass gleams, but no one uses it. She listens to the physician who lectures that too much heat will excite the humours. He prescribes gentle rubs with linen, a whiff of vinegar to guard against miasmas. Outside, a musician's violin floats through the cold air, bittersweet, graceful. Inside, water steams briefly before chilling fast. The servants chatter quietly, their laughter brittle with exhaustion. You lean against the wall, feeling the draft creep around your ankles, hearing the muted splash of water in metal basins. And you drift, understanding that even in gilded palaces, fear clung like grime that no one dared fully wash away. Now you're in a bustling Moroccan Medina in the 19th century. The narrow alleys twist like roots, filled with cries of merchants, the smell of spices and charcoal fires. You find the hammam entrance, unassuming but well known. A carved wooden door opens onto tiled halls, bathed in soft light filtering through pierced screens. Inside, the air is heavy with fragrant steam, eucalyptus, orange blossom, musk soap. Women cluster in one chamber, gossip swirling with the mist. Children are scrubbed pink and clean while their mothers argue, laugh, share secrets. An old woman pours hot water over cracked marble, chanting prayers in Arabic to keep sickness away. She remembers plague years when the city's gates closed, when rumours claimed hammams spread death. The bathkeeper still sprinkles herbs on hot stones to cleanse the air. In the men's section, friends sprawl on heated benches, debating poetry, trade deals, politics. A scholar warns them not to overheat themselves. It weakens the body's defences. No one listens too hard. The baths are essential. The city is dusty, crowded. Cleanliness is faith, habit, civilization itself. Outside, a muezzin's call to prayer threads through the dusk. Inside, water drips into carved drains, candles flicker behind coloured glass. You lean against cool tile, feeling the warmth seep into your bones, listening to whispers echo off old stone, and you drift, comforted by the thought that even fear could not close these doors for good. You're in early 19th century Ireland, in a countryside battered by rain and wind that never quite dries. The thatched cottages huddle low to the ground, smoke leaking from turf fires. You step inside one. The family prepares for rare washing. The father eyes the sky warily, convinced drafts cause fevers. The mother heats water over the hearth, adding dried herbs, sage, mint, said to fight chills. She tests the heat with her cracked fingers, adjusts it carefully. The tub is small, a wooden barrel repurposed. The eldest son, red-faced from embarrassment, climbs in first. He yelps as the mother scrubs behind his ears. You hear her scold him. If you're going to mass, you'll be clean. But there's fear too. The priest warned against excess. Says hot water draws sickness in through open pores. They keep the water only warm. She worries about the cost of fuel. Every log matters in winter. By the last child, the water is grey. The father refuses to bathe at all, claiming it's unnatural, inviting weakness. Outside, wind batters the door. Rain hisses against the thatch. Inside, the fire pops and smokes. The mother wrings out the rag, watching steam fade. You lean in the doorway, listening to the hush as they dress in scratchy woolens, still damp, but cleaner. And you drift, thinking how even the poorest sought these fragile moments of relief, balancing hope against fear like coals on the hearth. Now you're in Cairo again, but in the late 19th century, the city changing under Ottoman decline and European influence. You approach an ancient hammam, its domes cracked but proud, worn tiles glinting under gaslight installed by the new authorities. Inside, old ways and modern worries clash. The bathhouse keeper shouts at workers to keep water clean, fearing cholera rumours spread by European doctors. They boil water more carefully, add disinfectant herbs, basil, mint, bitter orange peel. But the old customers grumble, it ruins the smell. Men recline on warm marble slabs, sweat trickling down bellies, while an attendant scrubs their backs with rough gloves. Conversation drifts to politics, foreign concessions, lost provinces, new taxes. One man insists baths are dangerous in plague years. Another snorts, and so is breathing. In the women's side, the same rituals continue. Mothers scrub daughters with olive oil soap, warning them to behave with modesty, even here. Steam curls under the high domes, catching lamplight in shimmering halos. The muezzin's call drifts through open windows, mixing with laughter, prayers, arguments about health. Outside, donkey carts rattle over cobbles. The Nile moves slowly, muddy and endless. You lean against a column, feeling cool stone behind you, warm air on your face, and you drift, realizing that even here tradition argued with fear, neither quite winning. You're in late 19th century New York City, the Bowery, a chaotic mess of horses, pushcarts, and shouts in dozens of languages. The air smells of coal smoke, horse dung, roasting chestnuts. You slip into a public bathhouse funded by reformers who believe cleanliness will save the poor. Inside, it's stark but functional. Rows of tin tubs, faucets that sputter unevenly. Attendants bark instructions in Yiddish, Italian, English. People wait in line, clutching towels, coins clutched tight. A mother scolds her boy for trying to wander. Stay here or you'll lose your turn. An inspector paces, watching the steam rise. He reminds everyone, not too hot. Doctor says hot water weakens the constitution. A girl with braids cries as cold water is dumped in to cool the tub. The mother soothes her, promising it's better this way. You watch an old man scrub his arms furiously, chasing lice that plague the tenement. The smell of cheap soap, harsh and medicinal, clings to the air. Outside, street vendors shout, trolley bells clang. Inside, water sloshes and drips onto cracked tile floors. Someone laughs, someone curses, someone sighs in relief. You lean against the damp wall, listening to the chaotic symphony of voices, water and hope, and you drift, realizing that even in the most crowded, filthy city blocks, people clung to the small mercy of being clean. You're in Istanbul at the turn of the 20th century, the Ottoman Empire, old and creaking but still alive with colour and noise. You push through a narrow lane filled with vendors shouting in Turkish and Greek, the scent of roasting chestnuts and coffee thick in the winter air. You step into an ancient hammam, its carved stone entrance blackened with soot, lamps flickering inside like tired eyes. Inside, the steam is dense, curling around cracked marble columns. Water drips in steady rhythms into brass basins, the sound as old as the city itself. Men lie on warm slabs wrapped in peshtimal towels, arguing about politics, poetry, the latest European medicine. A barber surgeon is there, offering bloodletting in a corner. He insists it's safer than too much steam, claiming the foreign doctors in Galata say heat weakens the nerves. But the patrons roll their eyes and soak anyway. You see the bath attendant ladling hot water over ancient stones, creating clouds that smell of rose and eucalyptus. He mutters prayers under his breath, warding off sickness maybe, or just habit. Rumours of cholera swirl. Authorities post notices. Boil water, avoid crowds. But the hammam is crowded anyway. A boy runs messages for tips, his bare feet slapping wet marble. He dodges older men arguing about rent hikes, European loans, whether the Sultan is too weak. Outside, you hear the call to prayer drift through the narrow streets, mixing with the rattle of tram bells and clatter of hoofbeats. Inside, the world slows to the hush of dripping water and muffled laughter. You lean back against cool stone, heat soaking your bones, listening to voices fade into steam, and you drift, realizing that even on the edge of an empire's collapse, people chose warmth over worry. Now you're in industrial Manchester, England, the 1880s. Fog rolls down brick alleys, thick with coal smoke and damp. The mills churn day and night, coughing up black clouds that cling to the skin. You find a public washhouse built by reformers to clean up the working class. Inside, iron tubs line tiled rooms, the walls damp, lit by flickering gaslight. The smell is soap, sweat, mould. Women crowd in, clutching children to their skirts, paying a penny for hot water. They argue over turn order, over who used too much soap. An attendant barks rules. Not too hot, Doctors say you'll catch chill after. You watch a mother test the water carefully, afraid of scolding. She scrubs her toddler, ignoring his howls. Quiet, you want the inspector to hear. A man waits outside, embarrassed to bathe in public, muttering about how real men don't wash like ladies. But he pays his penny anyway. He knows what lice bring. Typhus, trench fever, worse. You hear coughing echo in the tiled chamber, always coughing. Outside, a mill bell clangs. Horses clop over cobbles slick with sewage. Inside, water sloshes, drains gurgle. Voices rise in frustration and relief. You lean against a tiled pillar, feeling the cold seep into your back, watching the thin steam swirl and vanish. And you drift, reflecting how even the dirtiest, hardest city fought for the fragile dignity of a bath. You're in Meiji-era Japan, late 19th century, a land caught between old and new. The city is alive with rickshaws, telegraph wires, paper lanterns glowing in alleys slick with rain. You approach a sento, rebuilt after a recent fire. Its wooden sign gleams with fresh lacquer, promising clean water, safe heat. Inside, the floor is polished cedar. Buckets and stools line up neatly. Steam hangs in the air, scented with cypress. Men and women bathe in separate wings. Attendants pour hot water over tiled basins, scrubbing the floor between customers. You hear quiet talk about Western doctors' warning of tuberculosis spreading in public baths. Some worry, insisting on cooler water. Others scoff. An old man recalls the days before modernization, when everyone used soaproot and rinsed with cold river water. He sighs. Progress means more rules. A child laughs as his mother soaps his back, scolding him gently in Kansai dialect. A merchant adjusts his towel, murmuring about foreign trade. Americans smell strange, he jokes, but he pays extra for imported soap. Outside, rain patters on tile roofs. Paper lanterns sway in the wind, their light blurred by droplets. Inside, water runs in quiet rivulets over smooth stone, candlelight flickering on wet skin. You lean against the wooden wall, feeling the warmth soak in, hearing the hush of private conversation, and you drift, comforted that even in a changing world, the old promise of heat and water held strong. Now you're in early 20th century St. Petersburg. Winter has the city in a chokehold, the Neva frozen solid, wind carving through fur coats. You slip into a public banyar, packed with shouting men who stomp snow from their boots before they strip. Inside, it's chaos and comfort. Steam billows like battlefield smoke. Birch switches hang in bundles, ready to strike bare backs until red. A pot-bellied attendant stirs a cauldron of water over a crackling stove, cursing softly in Russian. You watch men argue about the Tsar, revolution, ration bread. One insists the heat drives sickness from the lungs. Another mutters it invites pneumonia if you don't cool properly after. They compromise by running outside naked to roll in snow. Screams and laughter pierce the icy dark. The smell is sweat, wet wood, burning birch. Conversations ebb and flow. Politics, wives, factory work, prayers whispered over aching joints. A priest sits in the corner, dabbing sweat with a rag, grumbling that excess heat is sinful pride. But he doesn't leave. You feel the heat press close, your hair damp with steam. Candles gutter in the fog. Outside, dogs bark in the dark. Sleigh bells jingle over ice. Inside, the world shrinks to this wooden room, the hush of dripping water, the hiss of steam on rock. You lean against the log wall, letting heat melt the cold from your bones. And you drift, realizing that even in revolution's shadow, people needed to sweat, to laugh, to be clean. You're in turn-of-the-century Paris, Belle Epoque in full swing. Gas lamps glow along the boulevards, carriages clatter over cobblestones, cafes buzz with laughter and absinthe. But you're not in a grand bath of marble. You're in a cramped workers' apartment in Montmartre. A metal tub is dragged to the middle of the kitchen. Water is heated on a tiny stove, the blue flame flickering as it struggles to boil. The mother stirs the pot carefully, soap shavings float in cloudy water. She tells the children, "Be patient." The father rolls his sleeves reading the Petit Journal, which warns about typhoid in public baths. "Better at home," he says. But it's expensive. Water has to be bought. Fuel costs bite. The tub is small. One by one they take turns. The water cools. The last child weeps at the chill. Neighbours hear everything through thin walls. The mother scolds them to keep quiet, embarrassed. Outside, accordion music drifts up from the street, mixing with shouts, the smell of roasting chestnuts and damp stone. Inside, steam fades quickly in the drafty room. Shadows dance on peeling wallpaper. The father drains the grey water out the window into the alley where cats slink and scavenge. You lean in a corner, listening to the water trickle away, feeling the cool night press in, and you drift, reflecting that even in the city of light, in its most golden age, many fought for the humble dignity of a warm bath. You're in early 20th century Cairo, where British rule chafes against centuries of tradition. The streets are dusty, humming with donkey carts, veiled women, men in fezzes haggling in shaded souks. You step into a hammam that's older than memory itself. Its marble is cracked, the dome's soot-stained, but the steam is as thick and fragrant as ever. Rosewater, orange peel, crushed mint. Inside, men recline on warm slabs. An old storyteller recites tales of Saladin and Crusaders, while an attendant scrubs his back with a rough glove. Whispers thread the steam, cholera rumours. European doctors say baths spread it. Some scoff, insisting only God decides fate. Others quietly use cooler water, add antiseptic herbs. A merchant boasts he imports carbolic soap now, grimacing at the sharp smell but insisting it's modern. An imam counsels moderation. Heat is good, excess is sin. In the women's section, mothers scold daughters to stay modest even as they scrub them clean. Laughter echoes off ancient walls. Outside, Muezzin calls the faithful to prayer. A British officer clatters past on horseback, indifferent to the tangled lanes. Inside, water trickles into carved drains. Candles glow behind coloured glass, turning steam into shifting gems. You lean back against old marble, feeling the cool beneath you, the heat in the air, the centuries pressing close, and you drift, understanding that even in an occupied city, even under foreign rule, people would not surrender the ritual of warmth, water, and whispered stories. Now you're in Berlin, 1910. The city is all electric lights and clattering streetcars, the air sharp with coal smoke, cabaret music drifting from basement bars. But you're in a working-class apartment building in Wedding. 5 floors of cramped flats, thin walls, too many people. There's no private bath. Instead, a small communal room in the cellar. Cement floor, iron tub, the smell of damp plaster and cheap soap. You wait your turn with neighbours, sharing gossip, complaints about rent. An old man warns, "Don't make it too hot. Doctor says that weakens the nerves." The attendant rolls his eyes, adding more cold to the tub anyway. A mother carries in a screaming toddler. She hushes him with soft curses in Berliner dialect. The water is lukewarm at best. She scrubs him with harsh soap, wiping grime from knees and cheeks. You see a man in a worker's cap pay his fee, muttering about the factory foreman who thinks bathing is soft. He dunks his head anyway, sighing as the water sluices over soot-blackened hair. Outside, horses clop over cobbles slick with winter sleet. Church bells toll the hour. Inside, the drain gurgles, buckets slosh, voices echo in the close space. You lean against a damp wall, watching steam rise and vanish under a single bare bulb, and you drift, reflecting how even in a modern city, fear and poverty still try to wrestle away the small mercy of getting clean. You're in rural Greece in the 1920s. olive trees twist under hot sun, cicadas rasp in the hills, villagers gossip in shaded courtyards, nursing bitter coffee. You step into a small family home with a dirt floor and whitewashed walls. The grandmother orders water drawn from the well, cold as a cave even in summer. They heat it over an open hearth. The smell of smoke and olive oil hangs thick. There's no tub. They use a battered tin basin, pouring water from clay jugs. The mother warns the children, not too hot, it draws sickness in. The local priest once scolded them for excess, saying simple washing keeps pride in check. She dips a rag, scrubs their faces, necks, feet. The youngest squirms and giggles, soap made from old olive mash stinging tender skin. The father sits in the corner, shell-shocked from the war, watching in silence. He refuses to wash, saying he'll take it with the goats at the trough tomorrow. Outside, goats bleat, donkeys bray. Dust hangs in the heat like a curtain. Inside, the fire pops. Water trickles onto packed earth. They finish quickly. Fuel is precious. Time is short. Disease a rumour that always returns. You lean in the doorway, smelling the ash and soap, watching the shadows lengthen on lime-plastered walls. And you drift, realizing that even in a land of ancient beauty, survival demanded compromise in everything, even in the humble ritual of getting clean. Now you're in 1920s Chicago. The city roars with jazz, car horns, the promise of modernity. But the south side is crowded, tenements pressing close, the air ripe with exhaust and garbage. You duck into a public bathhouse built by reformers. White tile gleams under humming electric bulbs. Signs in English, Polish, Italian bark the rules. Don't linger. Cool water recommended. Doctors warn of heat prostration. Men queue with towels slung over shoulders. Women with babies wait behind another door. A sign reads, "Separate facilities for coloured patrons," in stark letters. Inside, the water is hot but carefully regulated. Attendants check temperatures, muttering about liability. You watch a young mother scrub her child in a tin tub, repeating in Italian that it's safe, even if the doctors fuss. A labourer slumps in another, letting dirt swirl from his arms into cloudy water. A nurse volunteers in the corner, checking for rashes, lice, signs of infection. She lectures about hygiene with a stiff smile. Outside, sirens wail as a bootlegger's car roars past. Inside, the scent of soap and sweat is sharp but reassuring. Water splashes, voices bounce off tile, echoing with relief and embarrassment. You lean against the tiled wall, feeling the cool seep into your back, watching the steam rise under buzzing lights, and you drift, reflecting how even in the age of cars and jazz, people had to fight for the dignity of a clean body. Finally, you're in a small Italian village in the 1930s, perched on a hill under the brutal summer sun. Grapevines tangle on terraces, church bells toll drowsily over red-tiled roofs. You enter a stone farmhouse, dark and cool inside. The family is preparing for their weekly wash. Water is drawn from a cistern, poured into copper pots over a crackling hearth. The mother tests the heat carefully. Fuel is costly, rationed even in peace. The father mutters about doctors in the city who warn hot water weakens the heart. She shrugs, adding cold to be safe. They fill a tin basin in the kitchen. One by one, the children step in, shy and giggling, while she scrubs them with homemade soap that smells of old olive oil and ashes. Outside, cicadas screech in the heat. Dust motes swirl in slanted light through shutter cracks. The grandfather sits in a chair, leaning on his cane. He refuses to bathe, says he's too old to worry about sickness now. When the children finish, she pours the water into the yard. Chickens peck at the wet dust, leaving tracks. Inside, the fire dies down, smoke curling lazily toward the low beams. You lean against the rough stone wall, watching the family exhale in relief, skin pink, hair wet, eyes drowsy. And you drift, understanding that even in timeless villages, even under ancient sun, the act of bathing was negotiation, ritual, hope, and a small claim to human dignity. You're in rural Spain in the 1930s, just before the Civil War rips the country apart. Olive groves ripple in dry wind, stone houses hunker low against the sun. Inside one, a family prepares for their monthly wash. Water is precious. Hauled in clay jugs from the well, it sloshes against cracked sides. The mother sets a blackened pot on the hearth, stirs it with a wooden spoon as smoke curls upward. She whispers warnings to the children. Not too hot, remember. Old Concepcion died after too many baths. No one is sure if that's true, but the tale sticks. The father sits on a low stool, rolling a cigarette, watching with weary eyes. He remembers army barracks, shared wash troughs, lice scuttling through seams. He shudders. They pour the heated water into a metal basin. The children wait in line. The eldest goes first, blinking as homemade soap stings cuts on his knees. Outside, wind bangs shutters. Dust seeps under the door, settling in gritty layers on the floor. A neighbour shouts something about Franco on the radio, crackling in the next house. Inside, the mother works quickly. The last child's water is grey, cold, but she insists they finish. Clean enough, she sighs. When they're done, she carries the basin out and dumps it into the dry yard. Chickens scatter, squawking. She wipes her brow with the back of her hand. The father lights his cigarette. You lean against a whitewashed wall, feeling cool stone under your palm, and you drift, realizing that even in a land about to tear itself apart, the fight to keep clean was its own quiet act of stubborn hope. Now you're in 1930s India, under British rule. The city bustles with rickshaws, cries of chai sellers, the smell of fried snacks and coal fires hanging in humid air. You slip into a small home in the old quarter. It's evening, oil lamps glow. Inside, the family prepares for the daily ritual. Water is drawn from the courtyard well, cool and heavy in brass pots. They heat it over a charcoal stove, squatting on rough floors. The mother tests it carefully. Too hot invites fever, she warns. They don't have a tub. Instead, they stand on the packed earth floor while another family member pours warm water over their shoulders with a battered tin mug. Soap is local, coconut oil and ash. It smells sharp, earthy. The father sits on a wooden stool, pouring water over his head, watching rivulets trace dusty skin. He chants softly, half prayer, half habit. Outside, temple bells ring, street dogs bark, a British policeman's whistle shrills in the distance. Inside, the children giggle as water splashes them. The grandmother clucks her tongue, scolding them to be respectful. When they're finished, the floor is muddy with rinse water. The mother sweeps it out the door with practiced motions. She lights incense as a final touch, smoke curling like a blessing. You lean against a clay wall, the air heavy with heat, soap, sweat, and sandalwood. And you drift, seeing that even under empire, even in poverty, bathing remained an act of resistance, devotion, and love. You're in Soviet Russia, late 1930s. The world outside the banya is suspicion and cold. Stalin's face glaring from posters, informants listening in breadlines. But here, in this log-walled steam bath, men and women remember older ways. Inside, steam rolls like a storm cloud off heated stones. Water sizzles as attendants toss ladles over the rocks. Birch switches hang from hooks, ready to slap circulation back into frozen limbs. A worker curses the shortages. No good soap for weeks. His friend laughs. Soap won't save you from the NKVD. The old man in the corner insists you can sweat sickness out. He smacks himself with birch twigs until his skin blooms red. Outside, snow piles high, muffling boots of patrolling soldiers. Inside, naked bodies sit close, arguing in low voices about quotas, arrests, the cost of bread. But when they step outside, they howl with laughter, rolling in snow, steam boiling off them like angry ghosts. An Orthodox priest sits quietly on a bench, fingers worrying a cross he pretends he doesn't have. He blesses no one, but watches everything. You see cracked soap made from animal fat shared between strangers. No one wastes a sliver. A small boy helps his father pour warm water over his shoulders, both of them shivering, teeth chattering. The stove roars, candles gutter, water pools on old wooden floors. You lean back against the logs, heat seeping deep into your bones, and you drift, realizing that even in terror and cold, people refuse to surrender the comfort of warmth, the promise of clean skin. You're in wartime Britain, early 1940s. The Blitz has smashed roofs, blown windows to shards, left blackened brick shells along every street. You step into a tiny flat. The family's gathered around the fireplace, the only warm spot. They have a tin tub tucked under the stairs. It's time for the weekly bath. Water is rationed. Gas for heating is scarce. The mother measures every kettleful with grim precision. She tests the heat with a cracked teacup. Not too hot. It's sinful waste, she mutters. The sirens wail outside. Searchlights rake the sky. Anti-aircraft guns thump in the distance. Inside, the children try to be quiet. The father reads the Daily Express, ignoring the water heating over coals. When it's ready, they haul it into the tub, lukewarm at best. The eldest boy goes first, making faces as the soap bites. The water is reused. By the last child, it's grey, tepid, the smell of coal smoke mixed with cheap lye soap. The mother sighs, rubbing her eyes. Outside, an explosion booms. Dust rains from the ceiling, but she keeps going, scolding them to scrub behind ears, clean under nails. When they finish, she pours the water down the cracked sink. You lean in the corner, watching the flickering firelight on tired, determined faces. And you drift, understanding that even as bombs fell, people fought to stay human, one bath at a time. Finally, you're in post-war America, late 1940s. The suburbs are sprouting like weeds, white picket fences encircling new dreams. But you're in a farmhouse, far from neon signs and shiny appliances. Inside, it's warm from the wood stove. A galvanized tub waits in the kitchen, water heating in big kettles. The mother stirs the pot with a spoon blackened from years of use. Not too hot, she warns. We can't afford doctor bills. She carries it carefully, pouring it into the tub until steam curls against the old wallpaper. The father sits at the table reading the Saturday Evening Post, pretending not to listen. He remembers trenches in France. He says little. The eldest boy climbs in, grimacing as the soap scours farm dirt from elbows. One by one, they take turns. By the end, the water is a murky swirl of soap and grime. The last child shivers, the heat mostly gone. The mother huffs, wraps her in a towel, rubs her arms. Outside, crickets chirp in the fields. Wind rattles the windows, carrying the smell of cut hay and damp earth. Inside, the wood stove pops and settles. Shadows pool in corners. The mother tips the dirty water outside, where it soaks into dry soil. She wipes her brow, hair falling from its pin. You lean against the doorframe, watching the glow of fire on weary faces, listening to the hush settle like dust. And you drift, understanding that even in the land of plenty, even in a promised future, the humble bath remained the measure of care, hope, and hard-won peace.